Hello everybody, welcome to our fourth installment on how to use DAX and PowerQuery for currency conversions and Power BI. If you haven't checked out the other three videos, I highly recommend give those a look because we're kind of going to build on those theories there, and I'm not going to go over them again in this video. If not, you should be able to follow along and hopefully pick up some tricks here. The problem we're trying to solve here is if your currency rates table for whatever reason doesn't have a currency rate on every single day. Now this can occur if your data table doesn't have data for holidays or weekends or whatever reason. The issue with that is we have, in this example, sales on every single day. So if we do not have a rate on that day and we don't account for it, when we convert any sort of metric, say total sales, it will not be converted. So we will have sales in USD because that's the base currency that our sales are taking place in. But if we convert it to say euros and it's missing a couple of days, those numbers will not be comparable because the euro will be missing some days. So let's take a good example of what I mean by that. So if we take a look at our currency rates table, we have the euro for January 2016, we have every single day up until the 26th, and then for whatever reason, the 27th and the 28th just doesn't have a rate. So if we go to our matrix here, you'll see that 27, 28, no rate. Now this currency rate with missing is simply just a sum of the fat currency rates table, which you just saw. Now since we have one day in the current filter context here, we can use min, max, average. I always just go with sum, doesn't matter. It will matter at the grand total level, but how we're going to get this grand total, it doesn't matter. This 26.6983 number is meaningless. It's the sum of all the currency rates above it, which you don't add currency rates because they are what they are on the current day. So we covered in how to account for this in DAX. And it was a little complicated, a couple of different measures you had to build on it. So I thought it'd be good to show how to handle this in PowerQuery. And this probably should be handled in PowerQuery because this is more of a data modeling issue versus a DAX issue, which is more queries and aggregating. Now, if you saw the DAX video, it can be done. But I'll show you here in PowerQuery, it's probably a little bit easier. It's definitely faster, and we'll show you why that is and how that is. So let's go up and fire up the PowerQuery window here. So here's our currency rates table. In this example, I have, I believe, euros, pounds, and dollars. I probably don't need the dollars because it's always just plus times 1 because our base data is in dollars, but it's in here. So this is the table we just showed that has this missing data here. So for this demonstration, I'm going to keep that as is, and I'm going to create a new fact table. Now, if this was in production or if you were just trying to do this for real, you wouldn't need two different fact currency tables. But in this example, I want to keep them separate so we can see the difference. So here's our final table. And I'll show you how we got to this, and see how we got the 126, 27, 28, 0.92, 0.92, 0.92. That's the goal. So that's how we ended up. Now, how do we get here? Let's take a look here. So I imported this data. In my example, it's just a text file, but it could be whatever source data you're getting it from. We just change type, no big deal there. Now it's important that if you have more than one currency in your table here, so they're stacked, so you get euros, pounds, and dollars, like we said, you want to separate those out. So you want to group them by their ticker, and when you group them with the all rows. So if I click in the euro table here, it's all just the euro currency rates, which is what we want. So we can see here that we're missing days here. And then the pound, I believe, is missing some days. It's in there. I think it's there earlier before that. Now I got this thing over here called invoke custom function. Well, what is that? This is a function that we wrote for, I call it fill missing rates. We're going to go over how I did that and how it's working in this example here. But if we just click into the euro, now it's this whole table, we see, well, we will see that it's complete. It has the missing data, which we saw in this expanded table out. Now when you just click in the view here, it's sorted from oldest to newest, and it was down here where we filled in the missing data. But trust me, it's there. So let's figure out what this custom function is doing. Now if you look, it's the column name, and then the source is pulling in this table. So let's figure out how we do that. For this type of thing, I always like to just start off with a basic table, do my transformations that I want, and get the outcome I want, and then use that as the way to build the function. For me, it just makes more sense than trying to do it in this table here where you have all these other subtables. So this is just start with our basic table, our fact table of the currency rates here. And for this example, I just want to focus on the euro, so I filter down to just the euro ticker here. Now my idea was, how do I figure out what days are missing? You can't assume that days will be in sequential order, so you can't just say, you know, if this is the first, this one's the second, third, and if there's one missing, just add one to it. Because we got the 26th here and the 29th, so we need to account for the 27th and the 28th. So my idea was to merge it with your date table, and you should always have a date table. It's very, very important. If you don't have one, there's a couple of videos on this channel of some other people doing some great things with date tables, so please take a look at those. But we're going on the assumption that we have a date table. So I went ahead and merged those. Let's see how I did that here. So here's my basic, my filtered down currency table and my DimDate table here. Now I want a full outer merge, which brings in all the rows from both tables. Most of the time you'll do a left outer, you just want matching. But for this instance, I want to know what's missing, but I also want to include the ones that do match. So with those all set, we merge it and we have the full date table as a subtable here. Now I'm going to go ahead and sort the rows. You'll see why that's important in a second. And then we'll go ahead and expand it. So I expanded this DimDate to only include the date table, or date column, excuse me. So what happened here? So all these match up here, right? One matches here, excuse me, here. Everything matches all the way to down. But here's our two missing days. Ah, okay. That's good. Now we know what days are missing, and it's all nulls. That's good. We want nulls in there. You'll see why in a second. So we want to sort the rows by date, oldest to newest. So then it goes 25th, 26th, and the 27th, 28th, which are now nulls, are smashed to where they want to go. They're not top, they're not the bottom. It's important that they're in this order because we're going to go ahead and just fill down all the nulls. So we want to fill down all three of these columns here, the ticker, the date, and the cross rate. We don't need to fill in date 1 because it already has the dates. So you go ahead and fill those down. No, we don't need the date column. Don't worry about that, that's not important. Because we're going to use this date 1 as the column of our date table. So you can see here we have a euro, 27th, 28th, of the last available rate. So remove the columns. See, that's why I didn't fill down on the date here, because we're going to remove that column anyway. And then we just reorder them, I like to put them in this order, rename them, and make sure data types are set. Actually, that being said, probably should set that. I'll just do decimal, it's fine. And that's what we got. So that worked for this one table. So we have the euro. But the issue is, how do I take that same logic and apply it to oops, excuse me, this table here that has my currencies grouped. I don't want to have a table for just euro, for just British pound, just US dollar, because there could be times you got 10, 15 currencies. I don't want to maintain 10, 15 different tables, and I don't want to take the time to merge them or append them all together to make one currency table. So we take our existing table here, and you go ahead and just create a function. And I already did this, so we'll show you how you use it as a function. So you do create function, it will give you this type of thing here. Actually, let me just show you how to create that function. So we'll go create function. Yeah, don't worry about that because you're going to add a parameter in there in a second. So we'll do create. We'll just call this function example. So we go to the advanced editor. That's fine because we're not going to tie it to anything. So we need to update it. It's very important. Actually, it's the only way you can get to work. So there's a couple of things in here that we need to pay attention to. This was just my source. I just it was, I believe I typed in the currency rates. So we get rid of that. See, delete that out. Delete this out because we're not going to filter or change the data type. So we're going to get this out here. So we're going to name our parameter source. Then you do what? So we're going to go ahead and say, change this out because this filtered rows step no longer exists. So we want to say source. You'll see what that's going to do. That source is going to be our subtable of each currency rate. And we can get rid of this and click done. So now we have function. See, I did the same thing in this one here. So just change it to source. Let's just delete those. I'll do the new function in there and see. Hopefully it works. If not, we'll troubleshoot it. So go to add column, invoke custom function. Function name is just all data. We'll call it all data. Then we're gonna call. We did the function example, and our source has to be this all. Click OK. And what do we got here? I believe it filled in all the missing for each subtable. So let's go ahead. Let's remove all the other columns. We're only interested in this column. Expand that out. I always uncheck this original column prefix name. And then you got date, ticker, cross rate, which is exactly what we need. And then we just need to set our data types. So we got date, text, and decimal. And look at that. 26th, 27th, 28th, 0.92. All done in PowerQuery. And then you can see in here, British pound was missing 29th, 30th. Was missing the 30th and 31st, had a 29th in there, so that's why they're all the same. And dollar is just one across the board. So it looks like it worked okay. So let's go ahead and close and apply. And if we go to our data model here, like I said, you wouldn't have two fact currency rates table, but I'm keeping both in there for now. Excuse me. And then we relate our dim currency rates for our lookups and stuff to this new currency rates table. And same with the dim calendar, or dim date, excuse me. So we go back to our matrix here. So just a reminder, this currency rate with missing was coming off the sum of the fact currency rates table that we did not do anything in PowerQuery with. We just took it as is and ran with it. So if we pull in currency rate of no missing, simple sum as it was before. It's already in there. Currency rate no missing here. We got 0.92, 0.92. Now this last reported currency rate is also showing 0.92, 0.92 in these missing days, but that was a DAX way. So if we show last currency rate measure, this is it. Not the most complicated function in the world, but also it has some complexity to it. It's not as simple as, excuse me, of the sum of some cross rate. I don't know about you, but I'd much rather just do that. And it also is much, much faster. So if we just do our final example here of converted sales. This one, the converted sales using this no missing currency rate that we did that's coming from the PowerQuery. And this one's using the last reported date, which had that long measure that we wrote here in the previous video. You could see that the output's the same. Here's what I was talking about, these totals. Since we used sum x, oops, excuse me, that's not the total. Sum x going over our DimDate table, we get the totals here. So this 26.93, even this 0.923 number, it doesn't matter because it's not taking, it's just taking each of the above that's already converted and summing them up. So as an example of how much faster this is, we're going to go ahead and compare this converted sales using the no missing right here versus the one using the last reported rate, which is the one that had the complex DAX. So we're going to go ahead and just let's get rid of these, So we got these two measures left, and we're going to fire up the performance analyzer. Let's start recording, refresh it here. Then we're going to use DAX Studio, which if you don't know what it is or don't use it a lot, I would highly recommend getting used to it. It's probably one of the best tools out there to really get into how and why things are doing what they're doing, and just troubleshooting, and just overall great piece of software. So let's go ahead and copy this query. We're going to paste it in here. So here's the two measures we just ran that are in here. So I want to compare them. So what we're going to do is we're going to comment out one of them for now. Get rid of that comma. And then I always want to load the server settings and the query plan. And always make sure you run clear the cache. Since we're comparing performance here, we don't want the benefit of a warm cache because that might not always be the case. So let's go ahead and run this. Let's see what is the issue here, 21.7. Oops, forgot to add a comma in here. Go ahead and fix that. All right, so this one is using the last reported date, which is the one that's using the longer measure that we did earlier. So you can see there's a lot of scans going on here, and it's not the slowest thing, but 71 milliseconds. Let's go ahead and take a screenshot of this to make sure we remember what that is. So 71 milliseconds, 62 in the formula engine, and 9 in the storage engine. Okay, let's see. So let's compare it to the one we did where it didn't need the complex DAX. It's just using the simple sum since we did the heavy lifting of PowerQuery. Let's go ahead and run that. Well, you can already tell there. So this one's running for 25 milliseconds versus, what was it, 71 milliseconds. And it's a lot less scans too. It's only, looks like 7 or so. And that just makes it faster. So what's happening here is that the data is already stored. So it can just go out to it and find whatever the rate is and multiply it out. It doesn't have to do any lookups. It doesn't have to do any sorting or anything like that. It just knows what the rate is and bring it in. The catch with that is you have to use more PowerQuery, as some people can shy away from M because it is a little complex and it's not very intuitive at times. I know for me personally, it was a little bit of a hurdle because I come from more of an Excel background. But once you get into it and you can really see the power of it, sky's the limit on it. And this is a small data set too. I just have 1 month of data in 2016, and it was about a third of the way faster to do it using the PowerQuery method. And another good thing about using the PowerQuery method versus the complex DAX is that when DAX starts getting complex, it gets slow, as we saw. And think about how many errors could be in there. Or if you come back a year later, a month later, whatever, or someone else works on it, how hard it is could be to follow that. But then you compare it with, just bring in this last one. Oops. That's pretty easy. That's pretty easy to see. And then when you think about PowerQuery here, you could step through. You could see exactly what you did here. And just go through one by one saying, oh, I did this here because, I need to merge this data table. I need to fill down to get all the rest of the rates to fill in correctly. It's more tangible in PowerQuery since you can view the steps versus DAX, which happens more in memory, which is great. That's what makes it fast. That's what makes it the greatest, ad hoc tool that I ever come across. So I believe if you can marry the two of doing as much of the heavy lifting in PowerQuery as you can, you could do a lot more in DAX a lot faster. Now this only works if the data you're asking for, it doesn't have to be converted on the fly, or else you have to use DAX because that's what DAX does. PowerQuery will only update when you refresh your data. So those are the pros and cons you have to weigh. Basically, it all comes down to if this number is not going to change and it can be stored, you should store it. Because then when you need to reference it in measures or whatnot, it's easier to grab. I'd much rather use a simple aggregator function such as sum versus a handful of lookups and other convoluted things where I have to find dates and all this other stuff. So that's how I accomplished this using PowerQuery. I believe it was the way to go, and it's much, much faster. But in the upcoming videos, we'll show that sometimes it will be faster to use DAX. In an upcoming video, I plan showing on the missing days if you want to use the average up until that date. Now, running totals and things like that in PowerQuery can be done, but that is a slower process. It can eat up resources. So that is probably better handled than DAX, but we will cover that in a different video. So I hope you got something out of this PowerQuery video and showing like, oh, you know what? It's not that hard to get into the PowerQuery and get into M and just figure things out. I'll be honest with you. When I was working on this function here, it took me a while to get it to work. There's different logic I was going for. There's different ways of setting things up, and you just have to experiment and try and see what happens. And eventually things will start clicking. And if they don't, we got the Enterprise DNA forum is great, and resources, just a quick Google and you'll find a million different ways of doing things that people have already come up with, and you can piece it together. So I appreciate you listening, and please, if you got something out of this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel. It's an outstanding channel. I mean, I tell you, I learned so much from other people. I'm more of a visual learner, so I definitely learn by seeing than reading a blog post or a book. I'm not saying those don't have the place, they most certainly do, but for me, seeing how people are actually tackling real world problems is great. So I hope you got a lot out of it, and look forward to the next video. Take care.